Chapter 288 to 291. Kuroto-kun, please be careful, and please also tell Cheyenne that her Oka-san will always be with her, spoke Miko-sama. Kuroto said, don't worry, you will have at least one last opportunity to talk to Cheyenne, so tell this to her yourself. As Kuroto said, he started printing hand seals, and instantly a heavy chakra pressure filled the entire room, and heavy winds surged like a storm. Instantly, cyan chakra flames erupted around Kuroto's body and wrapped around him. Miko-sama subconsciously raised her arms over her face to protect herself from the pressure winds. Honestly, she was rather surprised by the sudden change. This is because the change is happening here different from what she expected. Miroku always thought that Ryumyaku is Kuroto-kun's greatest reliance, but according to what is happening here, Kuroto-kun doesn't seem to be relying on Ryumyaku, and yet such intense chakra pressure. Fortunately, Kuroto's Tenseigan chakra was very peaceful and gentle compared to the overbearing and violent chakra that most have, so even though raging wind pressure covered the room and the surroundings, it was not uncomfortable or scary for her spirit to withstand this pressure. As the winds calmed down a little, Miko-sama asked, what did you mean by the last chance? I am already dead, even my spirit won't be able to stay here for much longer, it is impossible. Kuroto said, I have a solution for that. This gourd can isolate chakra pretty well, and I have created a small opening, enter inside the gourd and I will close the seal, then after I solve Yomi and the rest of the cultists, I will go back to Konoha, and you will have the last opportunity to have a conversation with Cheyenne. Miko-sama was silent for a while then nodded and rushed into the Ryumyaku gourd. After that, Kuroto looked coldly at Yomi who was standing on the other side. Even Yomi was shocked by the sudden chakra pressure, he obviously did not expect Hyuga Kuroto to have such an ability. Kuroto said coldly, the last time you somehow managed to survive despite losing your head, it was your luck and my carelessness that I did not destroy your entire corpse, but this time it won't happen again. Yomi's look was gloomy upon being reminded of their last battle. He suddenly laughed wildly, wahahaha, idiot, do you think I would be unprepared? Ever since last humiliation, I have been preparing, I have been waiting to finally find you again and give you the same death that you tried to give me. So don't think that you will ever be able to escape from here, because I am not the only person who is after you. Kuroto's lips arched in a mocking smile, oh, is that right? So why don't you just call Hirako Nad Shino here so that I can be done with you, and go back home to deal with the other pressing matters which are more important than taking care of some mob-class villains who don't know when to give up. Yomi's expression changed, how do you know about those two? Does it really matter? Now, why don't you call them? Kuroto took a pause here, and seeing that Yomi did not come out of his shock, Kuroto spoke in disdain, why don't you call them? Don't tell me, are they not here any longer? Because if that's the case then just dealing with you would be too boring. Yomi roared in anger, shut up. Shut up, shut up, shut up, who gives a damn if they are not here, I don't need either of their help anymore to deal with you. Thinking of what Miko-sama said, Shino has already swallowed Morio, and his next goal seems to be Miko's power, and since Miko-sama herself is dead, so Morio's next goal is Cheyenne, and since Cheyenne is in Konoha right now, then that means Shino is headed to Konoha. And since there is nothing more left in the land of demons anymore, so it is likely that Hirako is also headed towards the Konoha. It is difficult for Kuroto to know their exact positions, but Kuroto has to somehow understand how long will it take for either of them to reach Konoha, and since Yomi is his only source of information, so Kuroto tentatively spoke, both of them went to Konoha, huh? Yomi grinned, even if you guessed it, now it's already too late. Counting the time, both of them would have already arrived at Konoha by now, but you do not need to bother with that, Yama, you will die here, no, to be exact you will become a part of me, I will swallow you, becoming stronger than ever, and more close to creating Senin no Koku. Yomi said and spread open his arms, in the blink of an eye, his body swelled up, completely losing the human form, and turned into a large monstrous appearance with several eyes, faces, limbs, and so on. Chimera technique. With just a glance, Kuroto judged that Yomi had used chimera technique to swallow many individuals, and judging from his disgusting appearance, it seems as if he has swallowed quite a lot of individuals, thus making him even more disgusting than the most disgusting creatures. Nevertheless, Kuroto had to agree that Yomi's chakra volume was skyrocketing, easily surpassing the chakra level of a high-tier Kage. He has at least swallowed a few hundred people. Damn, is this guy crazy to swallow hundreds of people? This is suicidal. Kuroto really couldn't understand Yomi's suicidal behavior, but upon thinking a little Kuroto shook his head without a care in the world, it didn't really matter to him, with what Yomi has done, killing him has only become easier, just one blow is needed, and Kuroto can guarantee that even with everyone Yomi has swallowed, he would no longer be able to bear the burden. Roarer. At this time, Yomi, or whatever that thing is, let out a roar. And immediately following which a dark and hoarse, at the same time a maddening voice sounded, ha ha ha, ha 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 ha. I have covered up the entire temple inside an enchantment barrier, this place is sealed off and you won't be able to escape from here. Listening to that thing, Kuroto chuckled, just perfect, now I can deal with you at once, there would be no issue of chasing and hunting everywhere. Yomi was speechless by Kuroto's comment and shouted loudly, die. Followed by Yomi's shout, a whole lot of flesh that was in a semi-solid state much like the leech used for Chimera technique, pounced on Kuroto. Not only was the speed of this fleshy substance extremely fast, but it was also extremely strong, because of the weight this fleshy substance carried. But Kuroto did not panic, Kuroto just drew his hand, and instantly a golden sword appeared in his hands, Golden Will Reincarnation Explosion. The dazzling chakra sword seemed to have instantly illuminated the entire temple. And with just a simple swipe, the golden chakra sword easily cut through the fleshy thing coming towards him, but that was not the end, as the golden sword easily chopped Yomi's swelled-up body into two parts. Puff! As soon as Yomi's body was split into two, blood, intestine, gut, colloidal fluids and who knows what not splashed out of his body and scattered on the floor, making the whole room stinky as hell. Even Kuroto had to hold his breath for a moment as it smelled too disgusting to be able to bear, he was afraid that he would die of this rotten smell. Anyway, the attack not only mutilated Yomi into two parts but also disrupted his chakra. In just a few short breaths, the adverse effects of chakra disruption appeared. Looking at the changes, Kuroto said indifferently, other people's chakra is other people's after all, even if you forcibly swallowed it, it won't ever be yours. Yomi, who had long lost his appearance, tried to stop things from escaping, but seeing that he was unable to do anything, he whined intermittently, this is impossible, how could it be? Kuroto snorted, that's what happens when you do things the wrong way. Yomi never expected that he would lose, not to mention lose so fast and so thorough, it doesn't seem to be any different from the last time he died at the hands of Yama. All the effort, all the preparation were all meaningless. That's what happens when you try to do things that you just aren't capable of. The original disgusting appearance of Yomi was beyond recovering after being cut into two pieces by the golden chakra sword. Kuroto couldn't even bother to look at him, as he felt nauseating despite the resistance he has towards seeing gross things. This thing was way past the level of something bearable, unable to bear anymore. Kuroto dispersed the golden chakra sword, and was now in the process of preparing Azure Will Reincarnation Explosion, to completely shred this thing into uncountable fragments. Although Yomi is dying slowly, the faster he disappears the better, and because this guy knows Kuroto's secret of being Yama, so Kuroto doesn't want this thing to ever come back. Therefore, Kuroto wants to be extra sure. And just when the Azure Will Reincarnation Explosion was near completion, Yomi, or whatever sanity was left of him, seemed to have instinctively felt the danger coming from that azure spiral ball in Kuroto's hand and shouted, damn it, even if I am going to die, I will take you to hell with me. Kuroto's face sank, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. Boom. 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 As soon as Yomi's voice fell, the entire temple was engulfed in a series of destructive explosions. And because the temple was surrounded by an enchantment barrier, forming a confined space, therefore, the impact of the explosion did not disperse to the surroundings, so the village where not even a single soul was alive anymore was not damaged, but because the energy of the explosion could not be distributed, so the waves and waves of explosion continued, repeatedly destroying everything. And this increased the power of explosions dozens of times. It was only after a few minutes that the explosions stopped, and the earth stopped trembling. As the entire temple was destroyed, so was the Fuinjutsu destroyed with the temple, as such the enchantment around the temple also began to wither away, and finally dissipated completely. And as the enchantment dispersed, smoke, dust, fire, and heat finally escaped out of the enchantment barrier and spread in the surroundings. After a while the scene finally became visible. And the place where the once magnificent and ancient temple stood was now nothing more than a ruin. There was hardly a single wall standing. And at the center was a deep pit that spread for hundreds of meters in horizontal radius and about 100 meters depth. And at the very center of the pit lay a sphere pitch black in color. There was not even a single crack in the black sphere, its surface extremely smooth. Click. At this moment the sphere suddenly disappeared, to reveal Kuroto's figure. If Yomi were to look at Kuroto's current state, then he will be shocked and completely out of his mind. That's because the explosion did not even touch Kuroto's clothes, much less kill him. Coming out unscathed, Kuroto observed his surroundings. truth-seeking orbs undoubtedly protected him. It must be known that the temple was protected with tens of thousands of seals, and if such a temple could not withstand the explosion, it can be understood just how much damaging they were, if not for the defensive power of truth-seeking orbs that protected him from the explosions. Otherwise, Kuroto would have been a goner. Fortunately, I was cautious enough to sneak here at night. Otherwise, if I sneaked here in daylight and Yomi was able to sense me, then I wouldn't even have had the chance to have a talk with Miko-sama's spirit, much less retrieving those items that have to be passed to Cheyenne-chan. Muttered Kuroto with a relieved sigh. Under such an explosion, Miko-sama's spirit wouldn't have survived. Kuroto can be sure of this. After scanning the surroundings, Kuroto can only sigh at the destruction. The temple, which has been standing here for over a millennium, was destroyed. The temple had unprecedented historical value, knowledge of several generations along with countless other things which also included thousands of years of inheritance were also destroyed along with the temple. And Kuroto will never have the chance to learn about them, and this made him sad. Shaking his head helplessly, Kuroto focused on the matter at hand, and after carefully confirming that this time every trace of Yomi was really gone along with the explosion, he too disappeared from the ruins. Kuroto has bigger troubles to solve, so he can't waste his time crying over the spilled milk. From Yomi's words, it has been confirmed that Shino and Hirako have long left towards Konoha and should be arriving or have probably arrived there, and if they have arrived in Konoha, then things are going to be too troublesome for Shursui to deal alone. The thought of Yui and Cheyenne being present at his home, and Shino going towards them there to swallow down Cheyenne, really scared him. Kuroto rarely feels anxiety about something, but thinking of what could happen to Yui if Shino reached his home really terrifies him. Rushing all the way, Kuroto arrived at a forest in the land of demons. After a bit of groaning and observation, Kuroto nodded. This place should be fine. The distance from here and Konoha is too much, and no matter how fast he rushes or flies all the way using the Tenseigan chakra mode, it would take at least 48 hours for Kuroto to reach Konoha, and he does not have so much time at his hands. Therefore, Kuroto decided to make a bold attempt and use soul travel to Konoha. All he has to do is to use Tenseigan soul descend, and transfer his soul to one of his clone bodies kept inside his secret laboratory. Because the soul travels in the form of chakra, so the speed will be extremely fast. Moreover, ordinary people won't be able to see his soul, so there wouldn't be any need to avoid commercial routes, villages, and towns, just fly towards Konoha in a straight line. But this kind of soul travel is not without its own problems. While his soul is gone, Kuroto's body will be unprotected and will be vulnerable. It could be discovered by other passing by ninjas, or may even become breakfast or dinner for some animal. After groaning a little, Kuroto bit his finger, printed the hand seals, then pressed his hand on the ground, summoning technique. Poof! With a cloud of white smoke, a huge figure appeared in front of Kuroto. What? How did this pig become so big? Exclaimed Kuroto, looking at Okinabuta, whose body was easily over 10 meters, and this shocked Kuroto. While Kuroto was shocked, Okinabuta looked at his surrounding with a blank face. He shook his huge head, trying to figure out how he suddenly appeared here. Oi, Okina, here, Kuroto shouted, look below, below. Prompted by Kuroto's call, Okinabuta lowered his head and saw Kuroto with a confused expression, wondering how Kuroto became so small. Kuroto has suddenly become so small, so Okinabuta hesitated to step forward because he did not want to crush Kuroto into a meat paste. Kuroto asked, you recognize me, right? After a bit of groaning, Okinabuta bent his head and carefully sniffed Kuroto's scent. After confirming that it was indeed Kuroto, Okinabuta nodded. Kuroto sighed and used his sword to cut a big hole inside a nearby tree. The hole was of the size that could accommodate his body inside, and Kuroto did not forget to add several sealing techniques to conceal the hole. After doing this, Kuroto said, guard my body here, don't let any beasts come near the tree. Okinabuta nodded and sat next to the tree. With Okinabuta's nod, Kuroto entered the tree hole, and used Tenseigan soul descend. Suddenly Kuroto's soul came out of the body and hovered in the air above Okinabuta's body. Then Kuroto in the soul form closed his eyes and tried perceiving various chakra reactions. Kuroto found that he was able to sense that in addition to the Tenseigan chakra present in his body hidden in the tree hole, and the light Tenseigan chakra present inside Okinabuta that was very difficult to perceive, Kuroto was also able to sense the Tenseigan chakra sealed inside the Kazekage puppet present inside his secret laboratory. And this Tenseigan chakra became Kuroto's beacon light that will guide him to Konoha. The loud sound of the signal flare immediately attracted the attention of the rest of the three consultant elders as well. Mitokado Hamura, Yuditane Koharu, and Shimura Danzo all got up following Sarutobi Hiruzen and hurried to the window. Looking at the eye-catching light of the signal flare, everyone's faces were tensed and gloomy. As per the regulations of the village, if it is not a matter of immediate urgency, then firing signal flare in the village is not allowed, as doing so would arouse tensions and panic among the civilians, which would lead to chaos in the village. And in such a case, if a signal flare is fired, means that the matter is of utmost urgency. At this time, an umbu appeared in the Hokage office, and reported, "Hokage-sama, the signal flare outside is exclusive to Team 11. As soon as he heard this, Sandame's face was gloomier. Even the other 3 elder consultants were shocked. As the members of the Elder Council, they are naturally aware of the secret mission that umbu Team 11 is responsible for. Now that Team 11 suddenly fired the emergency signal flare must mean that something has gone wrong with the Uzumaki Naruto, that is Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. Danzo immediately said, "Hiruzen, it can only be the work of Amatsukami, let me deal with the situation." Sandame groaned a little and then nodded, "Alright, make sure that Uzumaki Naruto remains safe." Kyuubi was at stake. Sandame originally wanted to go in person, but considering the anonymous letter about the Uchiha clan's planned coup d'état, Hiruzen must sit back in the village just in case this matter had something to do with the Uchiha clan. So Sandame agreed and allowed Shimura Danzo to go after the Kyuubi. With the approval of Hiruzen, Danzo immediately led a few members of the umbu, including the root shinobi, and left in the direction from where the emergency signal flare was fired. Standing by the window, looking at the ninjas rushing in the night, Sandame sighed. He did not want the night of the Kyuubi's attack to repeat again. With the departure of Shimura Danzo, only Sandame and the other 2 consultants were left in the Hokage office. Udatane Koharu said, "Hiruzen, Kyuubi's Jinchuriki is attacked. We must issue emergency in the village. The attacking party could be anyone from the Uchiha clan, or Amatsukami, or probably even Akatsuki, but if it's the Uchiha clan, then..." However, before Koharu had finished her words, a figure suddenly broke through the window of the Hokage office and entered inside. His speed was so fast that even before anyone could react to the sudden arrival of the intruder, he had already rushed towards Mitokado Koharu. His attempt was to pierce Mitokado Hamura's throat, as a result, killing him in just one blow. "You are..." The intruder's speed was too fast, and Mitokado had no time to fully counter the sudden attack, but he still managed to lean back a little as a result, avoiding the kunai piercing his throat, but it still pierced his shoulder, spreading blood. But now Mitokado was already prepared, and he instantly leaped backward. Held his left shoulder with his right hand to stop the blood flow. He didn't really care much about his injuries. What he cared much about was the identity of the intruder. Even if the attacker is wearing a mask, Mitokado recognized those scarlet eyes with 3 black tomo spinning within them. And because he recognized those eyes, which is Sharingan, so he understood the meaning of this attack and immediately warned Sandame, who was not far away and already preparing to kill the intruder, "Be careful, Hiruzen, he has Sharingan." The attacker did not care about Mitokado's words, and he also did not stop his attack and again pounced on Mitokado. Whyish! 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 At this time, Sandame had already thrown shuriken, hindering the intruder from attacking Mitokado. Listening to the sound of incoming shuriken, the intruder halted and immediately dodged the shuriken. With the gap created between the intruder and Mitokado, Mitokado flashed from his position and appeared on the other end of the Hokage office to block off the intruder's escape route. While Udatane Koharu stood at the third end, effectively surrounding the intruder in a 3-way siege, Sandame looked at the intruder and asked coldly, "Who are you and what do you want to accomplish by attacking the members of Konoha Advisory Council?" Udatane Koharu stated, "With that height and body shape, along with that incredibly fast speed and the pair of Sharingan, are you Uchiha Shursui?" Uchiha clan indeed has many top-level shinobi even after losing 4 of their elites, but there are only a few handful Uchiha strong enough to be able to hurt Mitokado Hamura, who is undoubtedly one of the strongest shinobi in Konoha. It must not be forgotten that if not for his civilian status, Mitokado Hamura might have also been a candidate for the position of Sandame Hokage along with Sarutobi Hiruzen and Shimura Danzo. Trained by Naidame Hokage, and having experienced the First, Second, and Third Great War, Mitokado is obviously not some run-of-the-mill shinobi. Even if his strength is not at the level of Sarutobi Hiruzen and Shimura Danzo, he is still a very powerful shinobi with his strength reaching close to the level of a Kage level. And in Udatane Koharu's impression, this intruder with his speed and Sharingan was able to injure Mitokado, and based on his height and body shape, he has to be Uchiha Shursui. Otherwise, which other Uchiha can match all the other characteristics? And this also explains the sudden problem related to Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. Sandame had also guessed this possibility when he heard Mitokado mention that the intruder has a pair of Sharingan. He didn't really want to believe that Uchiha Shursui would betray the village. But the opponent's speed is too fast, and only sure sway is that only Uchiha known to have such a speed. The security of the Hokage building was breached and the intruder managed to break into the Hokage office, so the alarm sounded in the Hokage building, alerting the present Umbu guards. Hokage guards specifically responsible for the protection of Hokage immediately rushed into the Hokage office. Their intentions were to protect Sandaime-sama as well as the two advisor elders. With the clear advantage of number and the fact that the intruder was surrounded, Sandaime said with a cold tone, "Take off that mask of yours and surrender, you have no chance of escaping." The attacker was silent for a while. He seemed to be analyzing the position of all the shinobi here and trying to find an escape route. Everyone also understood what he intends to do. And just when everyone thought that he is planning to escape from here, the attacker, contrary to their expectations, leaped forward, exploding into his top speed, disappeared from his position, and rushed towards Sarutobi Hiruzen. Looking at the incoming assailant, and the tree-black Tomo spinning in his Sharingan will, Sandaime did not panic, and still had a calm and collected look, much to the displeasure of the assailant. However, the speed displayed by the attacker this time was far more superior than previously, and before anyone could react to such ghostly speed, he had already passed through the Umbu teams and pierced through Sandaime's chest with a kunai. Shit! Hokage-sama! Everyone was taken aback. And just when the attacker thought that he had succeeded in assassinating the Sandaime Hokage, the body of Sandaime suddenly turned into mud. The mud wrapped around the attacker's body, effectively trapping him. And then one of the Umbu members on the other end of the room transformed back into Sandaime, and said coldly, "Since you don't want to surrender willingly, then don't blame this old man for what's about to come." Seeing that Sandaime was completely fine, and in fact, even reversed the situation, everyone was relieved. Kanahagakur. Looking at the stable and prosperous knight, the masked man who stood on top of the Hokage mountain muttered to himself, "This kind of prosperity is false and fragile, I only need to touch it once to ruin it. This false world is not even worth nostalgia. So then, let's begin." After speaking this, the masked man's body disappeared into a spiraling void. A few seconds later, the same spiraling vortex appeared inside Uzumaki Naruto's home. Walking out of the spiraling vortex, the masked man looked coldly at Uzumaki Naruto who was sleeping on his bed. Uzumaki Naruto was peacefully sleeping, dreaming of once again eating Ichiraka ramen. The slumbering Uzumaki Naruto was completely unaware of the sudden intruder who can forever take him away from his Ichiraka ramen. After looking at Uzumaki Naruto for a few seconds, the masked man looked outside the window. He was aware that the Umbu Team 11 is responsible for the protection of Uzumaki Naruto. In Team 11, Uchiha Shursui is the only one that masked man thinks would be difficult to deal with. The opposite party has Manjikyu Sharingan, and the dojutsu that Shursui has is not known to him. But considering that it is a Manjikyu Sharingan, and it is awakened by none other than Uchiha Shursui, the most genius of the Uchiha clan, so the Manjikyu Sharingan ability cannot be underestimated. As for the others, the masked man didn't really care about either of their presence. There is Hatake Kakashi, but Hatake Kakashi is no threat to him. As for Hyuga Kuroto and Might Guy, masked man even disdains them. When he learned that people like Hyuga Kuroto and Might Guy were part of the Umbu Black Ops that only recruits elites, the masked man was a bit surprised, but more than surprised, he was disdainful towards the village. The fact that weaklings like Hyuga Kuroto and Might Guy have become part of the Umbu only proves that the village is rotten to the core and lacks talented individuals. Converging his thoughts, the masked man focused on the thing he was here for. Lifting his hands he stretched them towards Uzumaki Naruto. Suddenly a few shurikens were shot into the room from outside the window, in an attempt to intercept the masked man's hand. The corners of the masked man arched in a disdainful smirk and the movement of his hands did not stop. It seemed as if he was completely unaware of the incoming shuriken. Tuck. 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 The shurikens that were supposed to stop the masked man directly phased through the masked man and nailed at the bed and walls of the room. And the very next moment, 4 figures jumped into the room from the window. The 4 of them are obviously the members of the Umbu Team 11, which included dog, cat, monkey, and eagle. But their arrival was a moment late, as the masked man had already caught Uzumaki Naruto and dragged him into the spiraling whirl. Seeing that the masked man wearing an orange spiral mask somehow made Uzumaki Naruto disappear into thin air, the 4 Umbu shinobi were surprised. Dog Masked Umbu asked sternly, "Who are you? And what do you want to do with that child?" The masked man chuckled, and spoke in a deep voice, "I will take away that Kyubi's Jinchuriki." After saying that, the masked man broke the window on the other end of the room and jumped out of it, disappearing into the night. Monkey, fire the emergency signal flare, and we will immediately chase after him. He may be a member of Amatsukami, but we cannot be sure of that as his disguise is different. Regardless, we must stay alert and recover Uzumaki Naruto. Ordered Dog. Yes. All the three nodded, and went after the masked man, and Monkey also fired the emergency signal flare exclusive to Team 11. Hokage Building. It's late at night, but the Hokage office was still brightly lit. Sarutobi Hiruzen, Mitokado Hamura, Yuditane Koharu, and Shimura Danzo, the four elder executives, were sitting in the Hokage office, discussing the two anonymous letters delivered to the Hokage building. According to the first anonymous letter that was delivered to the Hokage building about a month ago, there was only one sentence that stated that the missing Nin Hiriko of Konoha Sanin's generation is conspiring to attack the village. While according to the second anonymous letter that was delivered to the Hokage building yesterday, it was stated that the Uchiha clan is planning to launch a coup d'état within the next 2 days. Looking at the two letters, Yuditane Hamura asked Sandame, was there any result about the investigation of the creditor of the first letter? Sandame shook his head. Hitaki Kakashi and Might Guy of Umbu Team 11 were tasked with investigating, but there was no result. It seems that the creditor of the first letter seems to be very cautious and did not leave behind any clue for them to follow. Yuditane Koharu asked again, and what about the second letter? Sandame shook his head. Team 17 was responsible for the investigation, and they are still busy doing it, but no result up until now. Mitokado Hamura said, I suspect that the creditor is from the village and knows the basic layout of the Hokage building. As such, he or she may be someone close by, possibly even a guard. Yuditane Koharu compared both the anonymous letters and said, given that the handwriting of both the letters is completely different, so we can assume that the creditors who send these letters are different. Hiruzen, did you instruct the Umbu to try to match these handwritings with the exam papers of graduating shinobi? It's possible that we can find some clue from there. Sandame nodded. That has already been done. I reached the same conclusion and instructed the Umbu to compare the handwriting with the papers of all the graduating shinobi, but the handwriting is completely different, not even a single character matched. Hiriko, muttered Yuditane Koharu, and said, I do have little impression of this person. If I am not wrong, he was conducting unauthorized experimentations, and you sent Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru to catch him, but he managed to flee, right? Sandame nodded silently. Even now, Sandame cannot forget the fervent gaze that Hiriko gave him when he was selecting disciples from the Shinobi Academy. Because of Hiriko's mediocre talent, Hiruzen waited a little and chose Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Jiraiya, who according to Hiruzen had greater potential, and did not choose Hiriko. Mitokado Hamura asked bluntly, Hiruzen, do you think Hiriko can be a threat to the village? Sandame groaned a little and said, his strength should at most be at the level of a jonin, so individually he cannot be a threat, but given that the kind of experiments he was doing, adding the rumors of him joining the Akatsuki, then he can pose a threat if he succeeded in his experiments and if Akatsuki plans to support his revenge on Konoha. After a little bit of thinking, Yuditane Koharu pushed the first anonymous letter aside, and focused on the second anonymous letter. And what do you think about this one? When the matter of the second letter came, Shimura Danzo, who has been silent up until now, was the first to speak. The threat that the Uchiha clan poses to the village is not unknown. Regardless of the credibility of this letter, we should focus our attention on the Uchiha clan. I propose that the monitoring of the Uchiha clan that has been withdrawn should be started again, and Root should be responsible for this task. Sandame did not immediately agree or disagree with Shimura Danzo's proposal, but had a conflicted look and he hesitated. The Uchiha clan has been somewhat calm in the recent period. The disappearance of Uchiha Hideki, Uchiha Ryota, and Uchiha Hiragi has been a shame for Konoha. Their disappearance has indeed diverted the Uchiha clan's attention from coup d'état against the village to hunting down Amatsukami. But the fear of Manjikyu Sharingan engraved by Uchiha Madara is not so easy to let go, and even if it is, professor of ninjutsu, Hiruzen Sarutobi, he can't fully compel himself to trust the Uchiha clan. What's more, there is always a probability that another Uchiha has awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan. And this anonymous letter says that the Uchiha clan will launch coup d'état within 2 days. Even if this is hard to believe, Sandame must take this seriously. But if the Uchiha clan is again put under full monitoring, and it turns out that they did not intend to launch coup d'état, and this anonymous letter is false, then that would again increase the tension between the village and the Uchiha clan. But if he did not put the Uchiha clan under monitoring and it turns out that they were really planning to launch a coup d'état, then the consequences would be disastrous. And if what this anonymous letter says is true, then he can't leave this matter alone. What to do? Shot. Huyeini Bang. While Sandame was having real trouble figuring out which option to choose, suddenly a loud popping sound resounded, following which a whistling sound and then an explosion was heard all over the Konoha. Sandame immediately stood up and looked out of the window with a solemn expression. If you want to support me, check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/Kaioshin. I tend to polls that decide important plot stuff in my Patreon. Many thanks to my awesome patrons. Nicholas Berenger, Ben Phillips, Yamatancho, Taco TSK, Yuki. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be here until next time.